I opened the letter and nearly choked. $200 fine for a bird feeder. Just a quiet little thing hanging by my window. Apparently, the HOA saw it as some kind of threat. What they didn't expect? That I had allies. And not just any allies. The Audubon Society. I've always found peace in the company of birds. Their songs in the morning, the flutter of wings across the yard. It was a small joy in a world that rarely slows down. So I hung a modest bird feeder just outside my window. Nothing flashy, just enough to invite a few cardinals, blue jays, and the occasional chickadee. It was a moment of calm, a little gift to the sky, but apparently my HOA didn't see it that way. A week later, I got a notice taped to my door, bold red letters calling it a wildlife hazard. They claimed it disrupted the aesthetic and posed a threat to the community. I laughed at first, thinking it had to be a mistake, but they were dead serious. What the HOA didn't realize, though, was that birds weren't just a hobby to me. I had just written a feature for the Audubon Society's newsletter. And unlike the HOA, the Audubon listens. It started slow, almost like a bad joke, the kind you think will blow over in a day or two. After that first warning about the bird feeder, I figured I'd clear things up at the next HOA meeting. Maybe someone was having a bad day, or maybe they misread the rulebook. After all, it was just a small wooden feeder hanging from a hook near the porch. But no, this wasn't a misunderstanding. This was the beginning of a full-on campaign. The letters came next. Every morning, a new one in my mailbox, each more absurd than the last. The first was a $200 fine. The second threatened legal action if I didn't remove the unauthorized wildlife installation. By day 5, I had a formal notice stating that if I didn't comply, the HOA would dispatch maintenance personnel to forcibly remove the offending item. I couldn't help but laugh. Offending? It was sunflower seeds in a pine cone, not a pack of wolves. But as the pressure escalated, so did the double standards. Just 3 houses down, my neighbor had a yard that looked like a novelty shop exploded on it. Giant pink plastic flamingos, a 10-foot inflatable dragon that roared every hour, and tiki torches lining the driveway like it was a beach bar in the middle of suburbia. And not once did she receive a single complaint. I started paying attention. A lot of people were getting away with a lot of things. Unapproved paint colors, extra vehicles parked on lawns, overgrown hedges that violated line-of-sight guidelines. Yet none of them were being harassed the way I was. That's when I realized this wasn't about aesthetics. It wasn't about rules. It was personal. And then came the moment that changed everything. It was 6 a.m. on a Wednesday. I hadn't even poured my coffee yet when I saw movement in the yard. There she was, Karen, the HOA president herself, dressed in her signature pastel tracksuit, phone in one hand, ruler in the other. She tiptoed across the lawn like a suburban ninja, knelt beside the feeder, and began measuring it from the ground up. She snapped 3 photos, muttered something under her breath, and left as quietly as she came. I stood there in stunned silence, watching through the blinds. I wasn't angry, at least not yet. I was fascinated. It was like watching someone go mad in real time. She wasn't enforcing a rule. She was obsessed with proving she had power over me. And if that ruler told her the feeder was half an inch too tall, that would be enough to justify her crusade. Later that day, another letter, this one citing a violation of Section 7.3, vertical encroachment into shared view space. I didn't even know that was a thing. Apparently my feeder, yes, the one barely 3 feet high, was disrupting the neighborhood's visual harmony. That was the final straw. I sat at my desk, surrounded by a growing pile of violation notices, and smiled. Because what Karen didn't know was that while she was busy measuring bird feeders, I had been preparing something far more impactful. You see, I wasn't just a backyard bird enthusiast. I was a longtime supporter and contributor to the Audubon Society. In fact, just weeks before this nonsense began, I had published an article in their national newsletter about creating bird-friendly spaces in urban and suburban neighborhoods. The article had been shared widely, even picked up by a few local news outlets. It wasn't a bestseller, but it had reach. And more importantly, it had the right people's attention. So I documented everything. Photos, letters, the early morning yard intrusion. I compiled it all into a clean, detailed email and sent it to the Audubon Society's advocacy office. I didn't expect much, maybe a kind reply or some words of support. But within 2 days, I got a call. A calm, serious voice on the other end said, "We've seen cases like this before. You're not alone, and we're going to help." That was the moment the power began to shift. While Karen was busy trying to control the height of a pine cone feeder, I had just activated one of the most respected conservation organizations in the country. And they weren't just sending thoughts and prayers, they were sending letters. Legal ones, with official letterheads, citations of local and federal wildlife protection laws, and one very clear message. The HOA had crossed a line. And me, I was just getting started. Turns out the Audubon Society doesn't play games when it comes to protecting birds, or the people who care about them. I didn't reach out to them expecting a war. At first, I just wanted to be heard. I drafted a detailed email late one night, frustration practically dripping from every word. I attached the stack of violation letters, time-stamped photos of my feeder, and yes, even the shot I took of Karen crouched beside it with her little pink ruler, like some kind of lawn detective. I didn't even know if anyone would respond, but they did. Less than a day later, I got a phone call from a woman named Erin. Calm voice, professional tone. But underneath her steady cadence was something else. Fire. She introduced herself as a senior policy advisor from the Audubon Society's Legal Advocacy Division. She'd read my email, reviewed the evidence, and ran the situation by their legal team. Her words were precise, but I could tell she wasn't amused. She said, "This isn't just petty, it's discriminatory, and it may violate multiple conservation protections depending on your state statutes. We're taking this seriously." And they did. 48 hours later, the first letter hit the HOA's inbox like a thunderclap. It wasn't just a casual warning. It was a fully sourced, legally grounded statement of position. In bold print, it cited local environmental laws that allowed residents to support native bird populations through backyard feeders. It listed federal protections under the Migratory Bird Treaty Act. It included a clause about discriminatory enforcement and implied that if the HOA didn't cease its targeted campaign, they would file a public complaint with the state's Environmental Protection Agency. But that wasn't all. Oh no. The letter was also copied to several key players: the city's Office of Environmental Affairs, the mayor's assistant, a local reporter known for covering community scandals, and most brilliantly, the HOA's own legal representative. It wasn't just a legal warning, it was a shot across the bow. The effect was immediate. For the first time in over a year, Karen went quiet. No 6 a.m. stakeouts, no tape measures, no violation notices duct taped to my mailbox like a scarlet letter. The HOA newsletter, usually stuffed with self-congratulatory notes from the board, didn't say a single word about wildlife management or aesthetic disruptions. It was like someone had pulled the plug on their power supply. I spoke to a few neighbors, people who had always nodded politely but never really spoken up before. They admitted they'd seen the harassment too. Some had even faced their own petty violations, but were too intimidated to push back. But now they were emboldened. One neighbor asked me for Erin's contact info. Another offered to start a petition to revise HOA policies regarding native plantings and wildlife-friendly landscaping. Suddenly, I wasn't just a bird lover with a feeder. I was the guy who stood up to the HOA and won the backing of a national environmental powerhouse. What made it sweeter was how surgical the Audubon Society had been. They didn't rant. They didn't threaten to sue recklessly. They laid out facts, laws, precedents. It was the kind of precision that doesn't just win arguments, it changes systems. A week later, the HOA issued a revised policy document to all residents. Buried in the middle, beneath some vague language about clarifying outdoor decor standards, was a brand new clause. Residents may install bird feeders and wildlife supportive installations, provided they do not obstruct shared pathways or pose a safety risk. Translation: we lost and we know it. Karen never apologized. She never made a public statement. But not long after, she stepped down as HOA president, citing personal obligations. The neighborhood grapevine said it had more to do with the heat from the press inquiry that landed on her desk 2 days after the Audubon's letter went public. As for me, the feeder's still there. In fact, I've added a second one, this time with a small, tasteful wooden sign beneath it that reads, Audubon Certified Wildlife Station, a gift from Erin and her team. Every morning now, I watch the birds come and go, sparrows, finches, mourning doves, and the occasional cardinal. And every time one lands, I can't help but smile. Because in a world where power often bullies quietly behind closed doors, it's rare and beautiful when someone speaks louder. For something as simple and as important as a songbird. And Karen? She learned the hard way. Don't mess with the feeder. 1 week after the Audubon Society sent that legal broadside, everything changed. It began quietly, like the calm after a storm. No angry letters, no suspicious foot traffic by my yard, just silence. And then, almost as if the HOA was trying to pretend the whole thing never happened, they posted a new notice on the community bulletin board and emailed it out to every resident. The subject line read, Updated Guidelines for Outdoor Decor and Environmental Support. I clicked, half expecting another round of bureaucratic nonsense. But what I found actually made me laugh out loud. Right there, tucked between mundane notes about trash collection and pool hours, was a single line that read, The HOA encourages responsible bird feeding and celebrates efforts to support local wildlife and native species. That's right, celebrates. The same HOA that had fined me, harassed me, and treated a pinecone bird feeder like it was a nuclear device now wanted to act like bird lovers were part of their grand vision all along. But the best part? The HOA went even further. In a clear attempt to save face, they announced a new neighborhood nature initiative offering to sponsor native plant gardens for any homeowner interested in creating a bird or pollinator-friendly yard. They even offered partial reimbursements for bird baths and bee houses, up to $50 per home. I sat there rereading the email, shaking my head in disbelief. The hypocrisy was laughable, but I wasn't mad. This was more than I ever expected. It was, in the truest sense of the word, vindication. It didn't take long for the neighborhood to respond. Within days, 2 houses down, my neighbor installed a vibrant little wildflower patch with a handmade sign that read, Pollinator Paradise. A few more homes followed suit, adding feeders, native shrubs, even insect hotels. The place started to hum with life. The same HOA that once tried to strangle individuality in favor of sterile, visual harmony had unintentionally sparked a blooming rebellion. And it was beautiful. As for Karen, she didn't take the loss publicly. There were no speeches, no explanations. Just a short, sterile email a few weeks later, circulated to the HOA mailing list. Due to personal obligations, I will be stepping down as president of the HOA board, effective immediately. I'm proud of all we've accomplished and wish the community continued success. No one clapped. No one held a goodbye gathering. Karen simply vanished. Her house went dark for a while, curtains drawn, driveway empty. Some said she'd gone to stay with family. Others heard she was exploring a new opportunity with a different neighborhood association. Frankly, I didn't care. She had finally stepped away from the throne she guarded so ruthlessly, and that was enough for me. But the cherry on top came in a small package. One morning, a box arrived at my front door. Inside was a custom wooden plaque, simple, elegant, with a brushed bronze plate that read, Certified Wildlife Habitat, in partnership with the Audubon Society, in recognition of your advocacy and courage. Alongside it was a handwritten note from Erin, for standing your ground, and for reminding us all that small things matter. I mounted the plaque on a new decorative post beneath the bird feeder. It sat there with quiet pride, nestled among some native flowering plants I'd recently added. Every time I passed by it, I smiled, not because I had won, but because I'd stood for something simple and right, something worth defending. And the birds? They came back in full force. Bluebirds, finches, doves, even a pair of woodpeckers that had claimed a nearby tree. But the bluebirds, those were special. Every morning, just as the sun crests the roofline, a pair of them show up like clockwork. They land on the feeder, chirping softly as if to say, we remember. Funny how something so small, so seemingly insignificant, could reveal so much. About control, about hypocrisy, about community, but also about resilience. And the quiet strength of standing firm when you know you're not wrong. In the end, I didn't just keep my feeder, I helped change the rules. I gave others permission to bring life back into their yards. And I reminded a few power-hungry board members that they don't get to define beauty or silence nature just because they hold a clipboard. And every time I watch those bluebirds take flight, I think to myself, this isn't just a victory, it's justice, feathered and free. So yeah, next time your HOA tries to fine you for feeding sparrows, just remember, sometimes the birds fight back, and they bring the law with them. What started as a petty fine turned into a movement, not because I shouted the loudest, but because I stood still while the storm passed and let the truth do the talking. In the end, it wasn't about me. It was about protecting something small and good in a world that's constantly trying to sanitize the wild out of us. And thanks to a little feeder, a lot of persistence, and one very determined Audubon team, we reminded them that nature has rights too. But I know this isn't just my story. I want to hear yours. What's the wildest thing your HOA has fined you for? Was it a mailbox color? A garden gnome? A flag? Drop it in the comments, I need to know. And if you thought this was wild, just wait, because next time, I'm telling you about the guy who turned Karen's yard into a certified wildlife habitat, with legal permits and everything. That one, you're not going to believe.